Welcome back to Real Talk for an Unreal World. The conversation surrounding Matt Schmidt today is an interesting one with addiction because he is an individual who made a career out of what he had done using drugs, methamphetamines. And it's important to have conversations like this to break down the stereotypical idea of what a drug addict is and show people that there's two sides to everything. Now, Matt's capability within a chemistry field and manufacturing drugs is one close to that of Walter White, but where we see an interesting transition is how he turned his darkness into the light, and he did not succumb to the very thing that was pushing him forward. Drugs in his life was a catalyst to help him cope with everyday life, but it allowed him to create a relationship with his mind that had him see life from a different angle and create all these interesting ideas. He has since gone on to become a quantum healer and turn his entire life into an example of how to be able to navigate people's traumas within themselves using techniques found by Dolores Cannon. So it's really cool to have this gentleman on my podcast today. He is a friend of mine and a wonderful human being. And in the end of the podcast, I speak about my own personal experience having a quantum healing session with Matt to kind of share about how these things can alleviate you from your trauma in your life, because there's so many other ways that we can tap into our soul and tap into the parts of us that hold us back that we may not know how because of a lack of tools and education. That's what this podcast offers you, is new tools, new education. So I hope you enjoy the show as much as I did having the conversation. Thanks for being here. Welcome back to Real Talk for an Unreal World. Today is a very, very cool day. We've got a wonderful guest, my buddy Matt Schmidt, who I have never physically met, but we have spiritually trauma bonded over the same common things that held us back. And they brought us together because we both went through the darkness to find the light. Matt's a really cool guy. He has a really, really interesting story just about how trauma became an asset to move him forward, but how he transmuted everything that happened to him in his life to be a healer today through quantum healing it's just beautiful. It's really incredible. And I was able to do a quantum healing session with Matt. My wife did one as well. And, you know, that was the beginning of what changed my life, seeing what can actually happen outside of conventional methods of wellness or healing, because it's so authentic. It's so real. It's so personal, you know, like Matt's not really doing anything other than guiding you into yourself so that you heal yourself. And that's when that happens, like on that level, you get to appreciate it. And I think it's important to talk about that because we'll get into the quantum healing later. But first, I want to hear a little bit about the journey that brought you to the quantum healing. So welcome to the podcast, Matt.
Hey, I'm glad to be here. Thanks, Justin, for having me on. I love the journey and been through some bumps, like just as you have, but also, you know, on the other side of it, wouldn't change any of it. Probably do it all over the exact same way again, because it's all important in getting me here. And I know for a fact I would not be able to do my job as well as I do without having that perspective. So probably wouldn't change any of it.
It's the authenticity, though. I think it's like lived experience, right? Like you're able to do what you do and put yourself in a position to be involved or guide people to their traumatic experiences and alleviate them from it because you walk through your own hell.
Yeah.
It's a power, right? Like these kind of things are just not institutionally learned through academics. Like you get these degrees in life, like hard knocks life, like real experience, real world experiences. Like that's what we come here to do, is learn in this manner. And when someone's able to be in a position like you, it's because you lived it.
Yeah.
Very cool. So talk about the childhood a little bit, like get me on the journey. Where did Matt start to separate from the love?
Whew. Probably in the womb.
Okay.
Yeah. I think a big thing started there. Not intentionally, but it was like, I think it was part of the plan. And I kind of have healed around this, but finding out that like my mom had lost the first one before me, and it was really hard on her. So she didn't want to get too attached to the one coming in, me. So I came in feeling like I had to prove myself. And then, so it started this whole, like, I don't know, pattern of perfectionism and not like feeling like I wasn't good enough, even as a little kid. And my parents are very loving, very supportive, but like I always felt that way. And that kickstarted a lot of the journey that we'll talk about later, but wasn't even aware of that until fairly recently. And my scientific mind was like, well, cognitive memory isn't formed before 3 or 4, so what could possibly be back there? And it wasn't until I actually did one of my own meditations that I made for other people, and then I'm like, holy crap, that's like my whole life. Like, my mom would tell me stories, like one that I remember was that I came home crying in kindergarten because I wasn't in the 99th percentile on one of my standardized test scores, and my academic career was over. Like, in kindergarten, he's a 5-year-old. Like, what do you do with a kid like that? And my mom's like, as long as you tried your best. I'm like, it's not good enough. Like, what?
Wow. I think it's important to talk about this, just to note, like, real quick, Matt's trauma began when he was in the womb. So for many people that feel like they had a wonderful upbringing and they just feel this disconnect from love, this stuff happens when you were a baby inside of your mother. There might have been a traumatic experience that happened, outside of the family or outside of her personal life that she carried and stored those emotions inside of you, and that transmutes into you. So you carry that stuff. And Matt is really good at unlocking and guiding humans back to that point. So I just wanted to throw that out there. So you did not become top of the class in kindergarten.
I was. It just wasn't.
Oh,
it wasn't the best in the country. It was like it was like, oh, already flawed.
Wow.
But yeah, just to add to your what you said about being in the womb, like, it's amazing how much stuff is there, because you think about it, that's your first impression of the world.
Right.
And like, maybe all mommy wanted was a back rub, and now she's pregnant with you. You're going to be feeling that,
Right. Right.
You're going to feel not wanted, not loved. Or maybe she's forced to like marry your father because she got pregnant with you. You're going to be feeling that resentment, that anger, all of it, because you're a sponge at that point, and like, you're soaking it all up. So that a lot of stuff starts at that point, more than I ever thought.
A big thing, like you said, is like, you didn't figure that out until later in life. So many people that are navigating this without this understanding, like, I mean, parents don't usually talk about those things because we're not taught how to talk about how we feel.
I didn't think of that would affect a baby even. Like, you're just like this, little meat suit. Like, you wouldn't think that would impact someone at that level. Like, oh, you probably didn't even remember that, because who remembers being born? So it's like,
right. Cellular sponge though, right? Like,
yeah.
DNA, everything is stored inside. And that's like a really wonderful awareness to have about energies and, what the real makeup of a human is just energies, and how we're able to transmute that and bring it in and release it out. But if we don't release it, you carry it in interesting ways. So that's really cool, man, that you were able to navigate to that place.
Yeah. And everything else is pretty decent around that. I mean, mom had some issues, just from her childhood and stuff like that. But it was confusing as a kid because you wouldn't know where stuff would come from. You'd be like, how did we get here? All I did was this, and it would just blow up. And it was very confusing as a child growing up. But it was like, as an adult, I understand it. But like, at the time, you didn't know what version of mom I was going to get. And that was kind of hard. But I think that whole like perfectionism thing carried through. And I think that's what pushed me to not really try drugs. I want to try experiences, like, I always want to try new things. I'll try anything once. But like, the first time I tried meth, the first drug I did.
First drug you did was meth?
Yeah, this is a heck of a gateway drug.
No doubt. Can you talk about, because I've never met anybody whose first drug was meth.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about how meth makes you feel? Just the reason I want to talk about that is because there are people that listen to this, just because my journey was based and centralized around drug addiction. And this can give some context into somebody who's got a child that's going through meth.
So for me, I was like the first time I did it was the most amazing thing in the world. I'm like, finally, I can be the version of me I always wanted to be. I felt like I could be the best version of myself doing that. And I'm like, I can do things that I never could before. Like, oh my gosh, I have all this like clarity in my mind and all this energy and all that. Like, it was what I've been striving for, and all of a sudden I had it. And then when you've been like wanting that for so long, and all of a sudden it was there, it's like, like I was set.
Yeah.
And It was sneaky because, like, in the United States, we had Desoxyn, which is like just a prescription methamphetamine hydrochloride that you could get from the doctor back in the day.
Okay.
And so it was like, it was like kind of sneaky. It wasn't like, oh, I'm gonna go like shoot meth. Like it was, it was like, oh, here's your pill. I take Flintstone vitamins. I can take this. But like, oh my gosh, it was such a profound experience, and I was like, I'm set. Like this is the best thing in the world.
Yeah,
And
interesting. You had something that you were seeking. And that's the funny thing surrounding the stereotypical idea of drugs. Like yes, it's detrimental to your growth. Absolutely. But the reason people seek these kind of things and they fall, I don't want to say victim to it, but they fall in love with a love-hate relationship, let's say, that's developed over time. But in the beginning, it's love because you're like,
mm,
yes, the escape, the thing that I needed.
it wasn't even an escape. I loved me. I loved the version of
Oh,
me
with
that I
the drug.
became. Yeah.
Oh,
I was like,
interesting.
this is fantastic. So like you tell people and they're like, oh, you're running away or trying to escape something. I'm like, no, I found something. I found a piece of me.
Oh,
Ironically
wow.
enough, I found that piece again, through other means, but it was some like inner work to find that piece. But like here I had it in a second. Like I
Yes.
didn't have the tools or the capacity at that young age
Yeah.
to discover that, and all of a sudden here it was right in my lap. It's
Or
like,
the ability to communicate about it. It's like you've got this thing that you're seeking, but you can't talk about it, and there's no tools surrounding the education to obtain it. So that's current society. That's what we have. That's
and
why
when you
people.
have like an ADD brain, or like for me it was like everything became crystal clear. It's like, and like all the thoughts slowed down, they like formed in order, and like it was just like I could process it, and it was amazing. Like the things that I struggled with before were all of a sudden like everything was gone. And I'm like, this is magic.
I mean, meth affects the body.
um
It affects
sure,
the mind. It
sure.
affects, your well-being.
I kind of I was very like I was very set on not letting it interfere. I'm like, once this gets in the way of something, like I was very set on having it not interfere with stuff.
Okay.
I'm like, once it starts to interfere, it's too much. So, but somewhere along the line that gets skewed. But I mean, I had a long run, where it's
Yeah.
wasn't right away, and then I justified it. I'm like, oh, I was valedictorian. Oh, I completed this. Oh, I got 20 scholarships to go to school. Oh, I like finished 5 degrees, and like and I kept justifying it, and it became just a part of my life.
That's interesting because I want to just hit on that. That's what a high functioning addict is.
Yeah.
Matt was completely addicted to the drug, but a high
Mhm.
functioning addict is somebody who's able to navigate life and achieve things in life that is acceptable by society. So, therefore, it's probably the most detrimental way to be addicted
Mhm.
because you're still succeeding at society's little game, small milestones or large ones in your case, for sure. But you're able to move forward in life with the drug. So the
Yeah.
drug doesn't have to leave because it's become acceptable. Same thing happened in my life with heroin and fentanyl. I was
Mhm.
able to have a company. I was able to go to work. I was able to do all these things and perform how society needed me to perform and execute what I needed to do was bring home the money. But anything that goes up does come down. And that happened in both cases. So I think it's important to say that as well.
Isn't that funny how we justify it then? You're like, oh yeah,
Yeah.
well, this isn't bad because it got me this, this, this. I would not be where I am without this. And
Yeah.
it allowed me to do some amazing things. I'm not gonna lie. Like,
No, that's great. I think it's important to talk about these
yeah,
aspects of drug addiction because the stereotypical idea of a drug addiction is what we see on the streets and what we see in the
yeah,
news. But most people don't understand and hear these side of things, like that we are high functioning and that they can and do take us to places in our life.
yeah. It's I don't know, pretty amazing because all these experiences came from these things and were added to by this.
Talk about your academic career. Like, I mean, there was a lot of things that you just listed off there that I'm sure a lot of people were like, what did he just say? Like, how many scholarships? Like, where did he go?
Yeah, I did a bunch of or got interested in like biology and stuff like that, and then that kind of like led me along some of these paths where I don't know, everything kind of built on itself. So that turned into like chemistry and more interested in like I don't know, a bunch of different things. And yeah, ended up with like 4 undergrad degrees by the time I was done. And those like combined experiences then all kind of pushed me to do like medicinal and natural products chemistry, where I was developing drugs. So I worked in a drug lab where we worked with hallucinogens, dissociatives, and painkillers. And so I had a DEA license to handle all illegal drugs pretty much. And it was probably a perfect storm, like being in that environment. Ironically enough, I wasn't like doing anything bad at that time. I'd been like making stuff before that on the side and just had little side projects. But when I went to like into that program, I kind of quit everything because you didn't have time to do anything. And
Right.
I was doing what I enjoyed doing anyway. Like, wait, you're paying me to come up with new drugs, you know? And you talked about like fentanyl and stuff. We were working with some of the fentanyl analogs. Some of those are like 40,000 times stronger than morphine. Like that just like blows my mind.
Yeah.
So we were actually looking up for coming up with opioids that didn't have like tolerance or dependence issues. So we were actually working on like drug addiction and stuff like that. So, and kind of this like opioid epidemic before it was even a real major thing at that time. Treatments for chronic pain and treatments for, because there was no real solutions. So we were developing drugs for that reason, came up with some pretty amazing things that didn't actually create any tolerance, any dependence, and kind of started a whole new classification of drugs that they're kind of now looking at for.
Yeah, I was gonna say, are they on the market?
I don't know where things are at. I mean, there's like a lag time from when you make something to like the time it actually becomes a drug. It's about at least 10 years because they have to like test all the different parts of it. But in like the rat testing and stuff, like they want to experience pain, and like morphine and stuff would like level off, and you'd have to like keep upping the dose to get the same effect. And this was like a flat line of pain blocking. So, and then
Wow.
there's no like dependence issues. So we test like to see if like rats would choose that over food and they weren't like hooked on it. So no, pretty cool.
That is pretty
So there was
cool.
a lot of potential. The problem was they made the compound that we were working with, or the drugs that we were working with, they made them like our Schedule 1. So immediately that means that there can't be research done. They're all illegal. They can't be used for any like medical purposes, and basically just like prevented the research from happening, you know, and for no good reason.
For
Like,
no good reason other than it probably works.
no,
So
they did it because of the reason they made it legal was some like soccer mom complained about some case that happened in a different state, and they found this in his room. He committed suicide. It wasn't in his system, but they're like, oh, it was because he was taking this that he killed himself. And that thing outweighed all the research that we did. I'm like, really? Like, I was like,
like,
how did that happen?
yeah, like I don't know if you see it was a pretty heavy coincidence if you ask me, if you want to get rid of something that could have so much potential in this world to be non-addictive. I mean, look at what fentanyl has done for drug companies. It's out of control. I mean, they've replaced heroin with fentanyl, and heroin was an organic. So, I mean, it had to come from the ground. And to be honest with you, who's somebody who was a heroin addict and a fentanyl addict for an excessive amount of time, fentanyl prescription drugs are far worse in their withdrawal, within the chemistry within the body, with the way they make you feel, with the lasting effects, with the euphoria, with all of it. It's fentanyl is the absolute worst thing on the planet when it comes to an opiate. A heroin was something you could function on. You know, you were able to still to be human to a degree. You know what I'm saying? Like the body doesn't process synthetics the same way, and it reacts to them very, very differently. There's a huge comparison to be done there.
I think at that time it was just like fear over anything. Like they wouldn't even look at stuff because they're like, oh, this thing's gonna ruin our community. And it was just by state at that time. It wasn't a national. So like I do get that side of it, but I think at this time it was like there was just so much fear on it just because people didn't take the time to understand. And that's really what it was in this case. It wasn't like oh, big pharma was stepping in at this point,
Right.
maybe down the road. But where the stage I was at in the like discovery of this, no one knew about it. It wasn't on anyone's radar. It wasn't like you know, it just became this thing, and they're like, oh, we're scared of this thing, and they just made it all legal rather than look at anything
But
being
it
logical.
But I mean, think about like creating an opiate that doesn't have a dependency. Like that's not, you know, some magical idea. Like
Yeah,
that's a pretty normal thing to be creating 20 years ago,
yeah.
right? Like, I mean, that's not really out of reach for what needs to be done for everyday society. But these drugs, Oxycontin, Dilaudid, morphine, I mean, this is what we've got, and they're working real well to have people come back on a weekly basis. So interesting
Yeah,
to me. But yeah, you're right. Like Big Pharma didn't step in at this point, but
yeah.
they would have been. They would have been right there. So, okay, cool. So you were developing freaking drugs, getting paid for it. Yeah, cancer research drugs or whatever we want to call it. That's
Well, okay, well, this is just treating pain. It's interesting because they were actually hallucinogenic before we like played around with them and could modulate some of the opioid effects. And so we had the first class of like hallucinogenic opioids that never existed. So like I don't know, no one really knew what they all did. And
what? Talk about that.
so we were looking at a plant called Salvia divinorum, which is actually it's a plant that grows in Mexico. And yeah, it was used like it was used for the hallucinogenic effects in Mexico, and then when it was tested, it actually bound to opioid receptors. So by tweaking that molecule and extracting different compounds from the plant, we're able to get more of the pain killing properties out of it. So, and then you could tailor different parts of it depending on what groups you left attached to the molecule and stuff like that. So, pretty cool work,
Dude, that's incredible. Like, just to think about humans that are doing that. Like, I mean, that's what an impactful thing to do for society is to be a part of those kind of things. Talk to me about a research budget. Where does this come from?
So research budget is kind of wherever you could get money. National Institute of Health. It was also funded by National Institute on Drug Abuse because of its potential for being a treatment. So if you had someone on this, they could potentially be treated for, instead of like methadone or something like that, you could give them this and they wouldn't have some of the same side effects and stuff that you'd have with other opioids. Testing theory, but yeah, so we were able to get funding based on that.
And just to talk about methadone for a second, what methadone is, it is an opioid blocker. Basically, it's a synthetic form of heroin that you take, a liquid form that's a pharmaceutical, and you take it every day. I was on it for 11, 12 years. If you don't abuse heroin or fentanyl and methadone, you have a pretty good chance of coming off of your opiate addiction. But that's interesting that had opiate blockers in it as well. And it was from the plant, because methadone was one of the worst things for me to come off of. That it stayed in my body. It stayed with me for like 6 months after I got off of it. So to hear about a plant that does the same thing and then doesn't come to market, these organics, everything that we need is found in nature. But if we don't have conversations like we are today with Matt, where are these conversations coming from? It breaks my heart, really, to be honest with you.
And without doing like some of the inner work around stuff, you don't get to the why you feel that way in the first place. You can get rid of all the drugs, you can get rid of everything, but that pull, the reason that drew you to it, whatever that was, like I talked about this magnetic attraction for, the methamphetamine back then, for you, the fentanyl, the heroin, like there's still that pull. There's a reason you were drawn to that. If you don't address that, it's like being like a dry drunk, like you still have like,
yeah.
So that's why this combination of things is like super powerful, because you can actually heal from the inside out rather than just taking away the drug.
But I think it's important, the work you were doing there, especially because I understand physical withdrawal.
Oh yeah.
Like, dude, physical withdrawal, man. Like, I did things in this life that I would never do. Armed robbery. Like, I never hurt anybody, but like that happened in my life. I went to jail for that because the withdrawal with fentanyl was just something. I was at a point and I just couldn't take it. My mind was telling myself that you're going to do anything right now to get the money. So I did what I had to do to get the money. I got arrested. I got caught. I paid my time. I did all that. But then when you hear things like what you're talking about, especially with opiate addiction, you need those opiate receptor blockers because it allows you to get in tune with the trauma that has you attached to the drug. So it's really, really important. And stuff like Suboxone and methadone, which are opiate blockers that are currently mass distributed by the College of Pharmacies as the synthetic for heroin users or fentanyl users, they're just not up to par. They don't work as well as, say, a plant could. I've experienced both of them, and they're very detrimental to your human body and your mentality, right? So yeah, you're absolutely right, though. You need to find clarity within your addiction to be able to go to the root of the problem, because I'm happy you said that, because we'll talk a little bit about this. A lot of people have asked me like how I did it. Like, how am I not in recovery? How am I, not using withdrawal management? pharmaceuticals or anything like that. It's like, just like Matt said, I went to the root of the problem. I found the reason that had me attached to using drugs, and I processed it. And I processed that with love. I processed that with forgiveness, with understanding, with self-love and self-care. And those are not bath bombs and getting your hair done. It's going into the deepest, darkest places you have inside of you and being cool with the parts of you that were hurt, and alleviating yourself from that hurt, because it's there to teach you something. So that is everything. Addiction is just a label, and it's just a distraction from processing how you feel. Right?
Yeah, I felt kind of that way. And when I went to like some of these meetings and stuff, there's like guys like, oh, I haven't drank in 40 years, but my name is blah blah, and I'm an addict and blah. And I'm like, no, you're not. Like, really? Like, you're still saying that? Like, why are you telling yourself that? You're reinforcing, I am this, I am this. It's like, dude, why? Like,
I know.
if I did something 40 years ago, I wouldn't still consider myself anything. Like,
it's true. And it's true. It's non-judgmental, but like, I mean, if you understand psychology, when you put yourself in groups around individuals who limit themselves, there's really not much going on outside of it. And this is just personal. This is a personal opinion, because I know there's a lot of value in AA. I know there's a lot of value in NA, and I'm not taking away from it. But when people ask you why you're not in a recovery group only 3.5 years after being out of a 23-year addiction, or same with Matt in his situation, it's because you see more than that. You are not the addictive label that you come with, the stereotypical idea of what society is labeling you as. Or for me, a convict. Like, I'm not a convict, and I'm not an ex-homeless person. I'm not any of these things. I'm a human being who navigated his journey and his experience with a little difficulty, because the lessons were difficult. So I chose tools that would teach me, difficult lessons, and some were beautiful because they brought me to the light. And that's just, it is what it is, right? So now who am I? Now I'm going to evolve into the person that I want to become, because I understand that all that stuff happened for me, like you said. And yeah, I think that that's important to talk about. Wild that we just talked about that. I'm like, shit.
I know. Hey, it goes where it goes.
I know.
With the one thing that kind of popped up when we were talking about being like functional druggies is like, when I actually stopped using drugs, I had people pull me aside, like close friends, and they pulled me aside because they were worried about me because they thought I was on drugs. And I'm like, aw, like, that's sad. Like, they didn't know the version of me without drugs. Like, they didn't know who that was. And they're like,
wow.
oh, we've just been concerned. We've been talking. Are you okay? And I'm like, I actually quit. And I'm like, oh, that's bad. So,
you weren't on drugs.
they thought I was, because it was such a dramatic shift. They thought something was wrong with me.
Wow.
And that's when I got concerned. I'm like,
that's wild. The unique journeys of addiction, or like where it takes us. With me, it was very, very visual. You could tell when Justin was not on drugs and when Justin was on drugs. It was very obvious. But it's interesting. Yeah, I mean, some people, they are just an everyday part of society, and they put the mask on, and even the closest people to them don't know. So that's very, very common.
It's hard to keep track then, because it's not, well, for me, it wasn't so much like the double lives and the triple lives. When you start getting the quadruple lives, and then you don't even know who you are anymore, because you gotta be this for this, and like this for this, and then you got this other life over here that these people can't know about. And it's like, you get really almost dissociate from parts of yourself. And even though it's all you and you're aware of all of them, it's weird how they like, you have almost like these splits in personality that you just have to do in order to stay afloat, like it's survival at that point.
For me, it was all a lie. Like, everything I was doing was a lie, because I was lying to myself. So even though I had like 15 different personalities, I'd screw them up all the time, because I was just lying in absolutely everything I was doing. And it just all meshes at some point where, yeah, that's just what you become. I became the lie pretty much. So I was grateful to be the truth now. Where are we on the journey? You are
in school still, finishing in school, and then kind of got forced out of there. I got divorced, and everything kind of went downhill from there. went back to some old patterns, went back to like making drugs. And if I wanted something, I just made it. I didn't have to go talk to anyone. It's like it was like a perfect storm. So but I was actually wasn't doing anything because I was happy for a while, like when I was in school. But then like when I got divorced, then that like rocked my world, and then that led to this whole downward spiral sort of. And things just got like obnoxious. So eventually got caught, got kicked out of school for manufacturing MDMA. And it was, I don't know, that was a rough one, because it was like everything I knew was over. Looking back on it, that's exactly what needed to happen to my ass. Like I was like going in a way that I'm like, this is not cool. Like especially like the amounts and the like the people you're dealing with. I'm like, just not worth it. And in my mind, I was justifying. I'm like, I'm putting out something clean that I know has like been tested, and like what people are going to do, whatever. I thought I was doing a service. I didn't think there was anything morally wrong at all with what I was doing.
Right.
I felt like I was doing a service to the people that are going to do drugs, and me being one of them. So
I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But like with that mentality at that time when you were in that headspace. I mean, obviously now we can see how that is not the correct thing to do in this life, because we understand more, we have more information. But, but at that time, man, like when you're trying, I was a drug addict. I was a consumer of drugs. I always looked for the cleanest, purest drugs because I knew I was going to do them. And I forget what the statistic is these days with the amount of per capita of human beings that are using drugs on an everyday basis. I mean, this is why they're becoming more and more legal, and this is why they're becoming more and more tested, is because many people are doing cocaine. Many people are doing MDMA. I mean, this is becoming socially acceptable. And MDMA especially is being used for relief of depression, is it not?
It's used in all kinds of therapies, just not in the United States so much. Like we're behind the game in a lot of these things, like psilocybin, MDMA. Like I was actually looking at hallucinogens and dissociatives for treating central nervous system disorders like schizophrenia and multiple personality disorder, and like being able to work through some of this trauma, like, which is ironic because that's what I'm doing now. And the reason I felt like doing the MDMA at the time is because like there was so much adulterated stuff out there and people were dying from stuff. Like so that was like the threat at the time. So kind of in my mind, like, okay, this is what needs to be put out there. And
I can appreciate
it
that,
was
man.
amazing like how, but I mean I had a good like run. You talk about like the double, triple lives, quadruple lives, like pretty cleverly orchestrated. I look back, I'm like, gosh, that was pretty like, I don't know, pretty smart. But that's the reason I was able to do it for 10 years, not get in trouble.
Yeah, that's a misconception within addicts, is that addicts are just dumb, and it's like, no, they're actually very cunning at getting what they need to get. They become master manipulators, you're problem solvers, you're quick thinkers. If you're not, you go down quick. I guess there is two sides to everything, right? There's duality with everything, but a lot of the addicts that I met in my life as well, like you were quick on your feet, like, and if you weren't, you were held back. So yeah, I was the same way. It doesn't shock me that you were like that, but it is interesting to look back on it and go, wow, man, like I did well in that class.
Well, we had a good run, like even looking back on it, it was like I knew the time was up. Like I was getting like everything was just getting hard, and it was like I was just kind of doggy paddling. I'm like I couldn't keep doing it up. I was finishing like my like dissertation, and then I was also like doing this on the side. So I was like going hard every night and like in a like closed part of the school. And yeah, like I don't know, when you're working with that large of amounts too, it's like hard to, you can't do like a 5-hour reaction. It takes 22 hours to add the, one part to the other part, because otherwise it overheats and blows up, so like there's a whole different finesse and just, I don't know, stuff you have to be mindful of that you wouldn't get away with on a small scale. So I don't know, just lessons in that regard. But then looking back on that, there was no reason I was going to quit otherwise, but the universe had different plans. I knew it, like I was supposed to be pushed in a different direction. There was no way I was walking away from that. Like, especially being invested just in the school part of it. Like you went to school for 23 years, you're not going to change on a dime unless like something drastic happens. So that was like a shift in my life where everything shifted then. And Then it was like 10 years of life not working out after that. It wasn't like I woke up one day and be like, "Oh, I should do this," and had these little gay dreams of like of becoming like a healer. No, it was like just staying afloat for, years and years and just, I don't know, a lot of suck.
Are you saying like after the MDMA you find your bottom, right? And then there's something that happens that for the next 10 years you are trying to process or
Yeah, not quite the bottom yet. I mean, it was like, "Well, that sucked," but then it, like, even got lower than that because then I didn't give a shit. I just stopped caring about everything.
okay,
When you're in grad school, like, everything is riding on that. Like, you don't have any friends, you don't talk to anyone, you're spending 100 hours a week in lab, or in school, and,
okay,
like, you kinda give up everything, so you have nothing to fall back on when that's gone. So, it
okay,
was just like, that fell away, and then I had nothing.
okay.
So then I was just like, "You know what? Fuck it," I
Yeah,
didn't care about anything.
yeah,
And that was pretty much like this downward kind of like descent. And then I was like, I still had these ideas like, oh, I can just go back to the way it was. And then so here's me trying to get like normal jobs I would have had, and like applying for like programs, and like of course knew who's going to hire anyone that with that background. But
yeah.
and it was a tough time. I'd say probably only like a half dozen out of like a couple hundred applications they actually contacted me back. Like I didn't even acknowledge they got my application. And
Wow.
it was just like a really like tough time for anyone to get a job, and then add that to it, and yeah, good luck.
10 years of pain like that. 10 years
It
of
was
just
about 5 years of that. And I went back. The only job I could get was a job I had in high school, and it was working at a factory making toilet paper. So that's what I did
wow.
for years, and like I couldn't get out of there. And then you're just, I don't know. It's like 12-hour days, and you're just like beat. The last thing you want to do is go look for a job or go do anything, and you're just kind of like stuck. And eventually got forced out of there because didn't show up enough for work. Like there was like days where it'd just be like wiped, and the roller coaster of of addiction. And I missed a few days, and then they eventually like got let go of that job. But then that opened up everything for me. Like even though I was like, crap, now I have nothing. But then that's what needed to happen once again for me to move into the next phase. And still trying to do stuff the old way. Went and started I applied for a job teaching chemistry and biochemistry, and by that I had all my charges expunged, so there was like no record of stuff. So I'm like,
Right.
all right, well, I can go get a normal job teaching chemistry or whatever. And, um, once again, the universe had different plans. I got all the way to the first day of teaching, and they said they weren't going to need me for the year. Like I didn't have a contract set up, and it was 9 months of getting everything ready, and they're like, oh, yep, we don't need you. And I was
Wow.
like, what? And they like left a voice message. I'm like, that's like breaking up with someone over email. I'm like, that's uh, so I told a friend about this, and then she's like, "Why don't you come to where I work?" She worked at a school for kids with special needs. I'm like, you know what? I just really want a job at this point. I don't care, So I went there, and like one of the best moves that I've ever made. Like I thought I was gonna go in there and teach them stuff, and I learned so much about myself in that time, and it transformed my whole way of thinking and how I was and who I was as a person. And the
That's
amount of growth
beautiful.
that happened there was like more than my whole life kind of put together. It was like amazing how much stuff that I've learned from those kids and being in that environment.
Is this where the drug addiction started to dismantle a little bit?
This was just more like maintenance stuff. I wasn't doing it because I hated myself. It was just like, this is the only way I know at that point. So it wasn't like going balls deep into stuff and just like,
Yeah.
not caring if I died or not. It was just like, okay, I have purpose, I have a job, I'm around people I like, but like this is how I function. That's
Yeah.
basically what it was. So
Incredible.
it transformed. And then that's where I met my current partner, Whitney, and like so many things evolved from there. And my soul just grew. And that's exactly where I needed to be. And that's when I discovered the quantum healing. That's when I had my first session. That's when I had all the amazing like physical healing, because I think at one point I was on like 14 medications. I was having grand mal seizures every week, and and then I did that healing session, and like the seizures stopped. I immediately stopped. In 2 months, I was off all 14 medications, and like I was like in the best spot of my life, and I'm like, I knew I needed to do this. So that's when everything kind of transformed, and they were like very supportive people. It was like being in a family. So
Yeah.
that was pretty powerful. And then that was the time that I kind of quit. I just kind of just walked away from stuff when I met my current partner, Whitney, and we kind of, that's when I just quit. I'm like, she told me to quit, otherwise she was gonna, you know, go our separate ways. I'm like, okay. I'm like, I never tried and failed. I just said, okay. Well,
Whitney, Matt's wife, is just these two, like, they're soul partners, man. Like, I mean, and they have a little one too. Oh, I forget her name. Lily.
yeah.
Yeah, they're just such a magical little family. I love watching their just like his Facebook and the shorts that he does on YouTube, because he includes the family, and you can see like this just little community, and you know a bit of Matt's story now. So like to hear what this guy went through and then to see what he has today it's really beautiful. It's really cool. So she is like I'm super happy that you found her. But how long did she put up with the drug addiction?
It was probably a couple months, and it was just kind of needed to happen, you know, especially bringing a little one in. I mean, I never had to worry about anyone but myself, and I, you know, I didn't care if anything happened to me. But then I was like, okay, this just needs to happen. So I did it, and I just decided to quit one day and just really didn't look back. I was still like drinking and stuff at that point, but like the hard stuff that was on my whole life, I was just like, just stopped. And I think the drinking was a huge part of it, because I think that helped me to be successful. I know they say, oh, you're just swapping one thing for another, but like, I think that was pivotal, because I could get far enough away from that the only way that I knew. And then by the time I got so far out, I'm like, oh, I mean, think about that now, because it's, you know, that's been like a year and a half ago or a year ago that I even touched that. So
I did the same thing. You know, some people are going to hear that and be like, what did this guy just say? But I did the same thing. You know, I did it my own personal way. Matt didn't tell me what to do. I didn't even know him at this time. But yeah, I felt that was a necessary thing that I could control, because I never really had a problem with alcohol. It just wasn't really for me, but it was something that put me further away from the drugs. So it became acceptable, and then I could drop alcohol like nothing. I mean, that was like, I'm done with that. So it became real easy for me to do. So yeah, I totally appreciate that.
Mine was a little harder than that, because I live in Wisconsin and like everyone drinks. So like, if you don't drink when you like go anywhere, I mean, it's like, I don't know. It's just the church picnics here are sponsored by beer companies. I mean, like it's
What?
yeah,
Seriously?
yeah. It's just like literally like this is like one of the highest drinking places in the United States for sure. And so it's like
Wisconsin?
everywhere. So like it's becoming less and less of a thing, you know, as people, I don't know, I think people just do it less and less, you know, as they're finding out they feel better. But it was actually like one of the harder things for, you know, it was harder than just like walking.
Yeah.
I really wasn't a drinker before that. And I'm like, oh, let's pick up this. Like, I was not a good alcoholic, especially when you're just like, I think I'm going to start now. Like, you get so used to convincing yourself, because you have to do it for everyone else. Oh, I'm fine. I'm fine. I was not fine.
Dude, in Mexico, same thing. Like, my wife's from Mexico. We were down there. We went down to meet the family, and you know, so much drugs comes from Mexico, right? So you'd think that this would be integrated within society. No, man. The biggest drug in Mexico is alcohol. It is totally a part of the culture, that it's become tradition and totally acceptable to drink at any time in the day. And tequila, you know, like this is the go-to, right? Like it's the go-to. Mind you, it's much different from the tequila that we get up in America. And it really is. It's something that is completely manageable when you're in Mexico and you're trying this kind of stuff. I mean, I did. It was certainly different, but interesting to see the social acceptance of alcohol within everyday society. You know, just like you say, like church picnics are sponsored by alcohol companies. Dude, I can't process that.
It wasn't even that weird until it was pointed out. Like, oh man, I guess that's weird. I don't know. It's normal when you grow up like that.
But I never really heard anyone say that. Is Wisconsin a state?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not really good on the whole 52 thing down there, or however many it is. I just know humans, and I know you're a human that's in an area where I'm not allowed to go, which sucks. So, but that's coming to an end. That is coming to an end. I'm very close to getting my pardon, so I'm able to come down and see you, because I want to come down and see you.
Hey.
Invisible lines, society. Interesting how they control us.
I think coming out of like any substance then was the hardest part for me, was learning how to do everything. Like, I didn't know how a normal person, like, cut the lawn or went to the
Yeah.
grocery store. Like, I, like, sat on the couch for, like, a month because I'm like, "How do people function? Like, how do people answer the phone or, like, or get back to, like, an email?" Like, if unless, like, it was such a way of life that was so hard, especially starting so young. Like, I had to go back to that time and, like, relearn everything. It sucked. Like,
Dude, I'm so happy you said that right now. I want to touch on that. That's another thing, people ask me, like, how do you be successful? That is the key component. AA and NA can get you out of the routine for
mhm,
sure. But putting your life back together is the most difficult aspect. Teaching
mhm,
yourself to think, teaching yourself to work. And the biggest one is teaching yourself to learn again.
mhm,
Because if you don't know how to learn things, because it's easier to just go back to the way things were, where you don't have to be an acceptable part of society, which just means personal growth, really, to me. I mean,
mhm,
if you just want to grow from within, playing society's little game here, right here, you've got to learn these things in your life to really overcome it. And I feel like that's the biggest thing that why addicts go back is because it's
mhm.
really difficult to do those things, and the support systems that are needed surrounding those kind of things, with housing or with food or with, just a space to breathe and a community. Yes, the current society does not support that as well as it should. So, Matt and I had to do a lot of work to get to where we are. So I think that should be noted.
Yeah,
Good for
and
you,
I
man.
think that was probably the hardest part because, like, in your mind, it's like, it would be so easy to not feel this way, to, like, get right back to, like
Yeah.
like, "Oh, I could do all this if I just"
Yeah.
like
You're, you're hilarious. How long you been clean?
6 years in September, so 5 and a
6
half
years.
years, or 5
Well
and a half
done, bro.
and
Well
change.
done. Absolutely. Yeah. For me, it'd be 4 years in March. So
Wow.
interesting journey. I know. It's just, and I feel like, honestly, dude, like I look back on it now, sure, there's, my mind is of a very visual mind. So I'm able, like,
Mhm.
when an old memory or something like that comes in, it's a movie to me. Like I'm right there. I'm like, I can see
Mm.
it in my head. I kind of leave this present moment and I'm back there for a minute. My wife says to me all the time, like, she'll see me space out and she's like, where are you? Like, you don't want to know on that one, honey. That was a rough time in that 30 seconds right there. But it feels like so far away from me now. Like it's like
Mhm.
a lifetime ago, and it's only been 3.5 years. But it just takes one step to get going, to get that far away from it.
Yeah.
Okay, so talk to me about, because this is the most magical part of the experience, is the transition into the quantum healing. I mean, this is just so cool that your journey is just so beautiful to me. I mean, I love it. It's so cool.
Well, that's kind of when I discovered the work of Dolores Cannon. She's an author who wrote, like, I don't know, like, I think like 19 books on different things that she discovered by working with people in this, like, trance state. And a lot of her stuff was about, like, past lives and stuff like that. But I was more fascinated in like, the healing part of things. And even not at the time, I was just amazed at this woman's stories because, like, here's this, like, lady from, like, Arkansas, just in the kind of backwoods, like, it'd be a typical, like, grandma,
Yeah.
listening to her talk. And then she said some of the most profound things and just, like, so matter of factly, and, like, none of it contradicted what I knew, like, from anything else. So I'm like, this lady is so fast. I could listen to her talk all day, and then I'm like, I want to have this experience. And that's when I found someone that, like, trained learning her, like, method that she used to use. And that's when I had, like, this profound healing. And then that's when I found out I was also supposed to be doing this work that I'm doing now. And I was like, that can't be right. There's no way that I'm going to be doing this. Like, I can't sit and listen to someone for 15 minutes, let alone, like, sit and listen for hours and have both their problems. It's like, that is so not me. And then I have this idea of who I was in my head. Well, I was this, I'm this scientist, and I have this, and, like, all this, like, I don't know who you think you are. And, like,
Yeah.
I had to let go of that in order to do this. And I'm like, there is no freaking way that that's right. But that's what came through. And I just kind of followed it. I'm like, everything else was so profound that I'm like, I know on some level I need to be doing this.
You dismantled the belief systems, though. I mean, I love how you
Oh,
just said
oh
that.
my gosh.
It's like you're no longer Matt. You're no longer a scientist. You're no longer this, drug manufacturer that lost everything. No, I am in this moment. And who am I? I'm going to discover who that is. Like letting go and surrendering is everything in the becoming.
Because like, who are you if all that's gone? Like,
Exactly.
oh my gosh, that's scary. It's so scary. Like,
It is. But one of the most beautiful things and how I want to translate this is when you remove all those limited beliefs and those belief systems and those labels and the agendas and the learned behaviors, you're a blank canvas. You're a
mhm,
blank canvas with consciousness in the present moment that gets to paint a masterpiece. And
mhm.
that is, man, that's everything. Like you get to shape who you are by making mistakes to make the masterpiece better. Like that, when you connect with yourself, you're going to learn about who you are. So then you're going to know what you want to do. And people are going to give you money for it because you love it. And you're never going to work a day in your life. You know, Matt's super free. I mean, I'm super free. Both of us. We had these crazy journeys. And here we are. Society dictates that we need to have an obligation of money. Sure. Finance, things like this. Okay, cool. We both do that on our own terms. Like Matt travels when he wants to travel. I travel when I want to travel. We see parts of the world we want to see. We're very free because we learned about who we are. We got rid of
Mhm.
all of the belief systems and learned behaviors that hold us back or teach us that we're this thing that we're not because somebody else said we are. I think that's important. Cool, man.
I would like to say that, but I think I'm getting freer each day. Because like I think it's a process. So people look at me and they're like, "Oh, you have it all figured out. This must be so easy now." It's like, no, I still go through this shit. Like I still like, have new stuff come up of parts of my identity that I'm hanging on to, or things that are keeping me stuck, or limiting beliefs I have about stuff. It's like I'm freer than I was, but I think it's a journey. It's not like,
Yeah.
oh, I'm all good.
Even myself, I make mistakes all the time still.
Yeah.
But we're at a point that we've pulled off enough layers that
Mhm.
we're able to be in this kind of space. You
Yeah.
know, even when you're making mistakes, you're able to pull up the mistake right away or the emotion, you know, you do something that doesn't compute with who you are. It's okay. You're okay with it. Everything's okay. So it's like it's all education. So you're able to navigate through the journey ahead without creating new traumas and holding yourself back. You just use it all to push you forward. So thank you for making that very clear.
That's the gift I get to give to people, and, like, how freaking cool is that? I go on vacation, and I'm excited to get back to work. Like, I don't know
Yeah.
many people that can say that. Like, that it's just so cool because it just keeps giving, and then there's this ripple effect. Like, every person you impact goes and impacts people, even the people watching this,
Yeah.
you're gonna be shifted, and you're gonna benefit the people in your life, and it just keeps going.
Yeah. That's everything. That's why I do this is
Mhm.
just to, help evolve human beings to become something more if the ones that want it are willing and to bring in education and bring in people that are authentic and teach them about things that institutions and academic education systems aren't teaching. And there's real value in this kind of stuff because you seek it on your own and you do the work to obtain the answers. So it becomes a part of you. Talk a little bit about what quantum healing is doing in your work. Like, how are you facilitating the healing process? Just so people have an
Yeah.
idea of what they're coming to you for.
Sure. So, I usually have people prepare a list of stuff that they want to address. It could be physical issues, mental things, could be relationship questions, questions about money, career, literally anything. And basically, no question is off limits. And then the day of our meeting, we talk for a little while. It gives me background so I can ask questions on your behalf. And then the second part of it is where you're in a relaxed state. I'm guiding you through a process of like deep relaxation and just asking you questions. And you're able to come up with the answers, you're able to connect the dots. And then from that space, you can actually shift the stuff that we're talking about, shift the stuff that's holding you back, and actually get to the root of where stuff is coming from. So, how we talked about like the root of my addiction or the root of Justin's addiction, you can get to where that root is, change it from that level, and then there's not that pull. So actually kind of healing from the inside out rather than just going through a bunch of stuff on the surface. And that's where stuff is so effective because it's kind of like, I don't know if you guys have the game Jenga.
Oh yeah,
Okay. So it's kind of like pulling out that bottom piece in Jenga and the rest of the stuff just falls away. And the other things don't become things because you've addressed the root of where that thing is happening.
dude. Did you just say I don't know if you guys have
I
Jenga?
don't
Like, bro.
know.
I love it, dude.
I don't
I
know.
will speak to my experience with Matt because it
It's
changed
such
my
a
life.
personalized thing that they're all so different. But yeah, I'd love to hear your.
When you go to a quantum healing session, you go in with no expectations. And Matt is very clear within his instructions or his dialogue that he sends you pre quantum healing session day. And it just puts you in a relaxed state right in the beginning because, you know, there is no expectations. You just go in with an open heart and an open mind. That's the best advice I can give you. What Matt talks about when he's talking about a trance is a conscious state. So basically, his voice guides your consciousness into a state of being that removes you from the mind and puts you into the heart. That's the best way I'm going to put it,
Ooh,
because
gotcha.
the heart speaks the truth. And what you're navigating is the truth. And it's difficult to do when we do it from the mind because we're so hell bent on distracting from the truth because we haven't been given the tools or the teachers or the guides to talk about how we feel, which is why we're navigating into areas where we have stored trauma. Stored trauma is just unprocessed energy, but unprocessed energy or energy that hasn't been transmuted will cause stress, fear, anxiety, and it will break the body down and implement diseases, sicknesses, and they will hold you back and you will leave this planet much quicker than if you process them. So this is an avenue to process emotions and traumas from within on your own because you know what you need and you know what you have inside of you. But like Matt said in the beginning, with his trauma, it began in the womb. So for many people, they may feel like they don't have this spiritual awakening or this connection to unconditional love like they want. It's a tool to heal that's been around for
Mhm.
quite some time and people are obtaining results from it. So that's the beautiful aspect of it. With me on my journey, it was just me in my room. Matt, we did this remotely with a microphone. Matt will set you all up. You'll see and learn what you need, but it's very simple. You just need a room, a computer, and a microphone. That's it. And he began my guided meditation, we'll call it. I think that's the best way to talk about it. It's a guided
Yeah.
meditation, and Matt does a very good job of putting you in a state where you navigate along your journey. I will say that for me, mine was highly visual.
Mhm.
I was able to see the first thing I saw was a baby. The very first thing I saw, it came into fruition. Actually, no, it began with light. The first thing we see is
Mm.
light. And then through the light, I was able to see the baby. And when I went to see the baby, I looked at the baby and Matt's guiding you along and he's giving you questions, bringing you an awareness to the situations that are happening, but he allows you to discover the truths. I looked at the baby and the baby was me. And I'm like, Matt, the baby's me. And he's like, well, and I'm like, I think the baby needs love. And he's like, you took the words out of my mouth, or I forget what you said, like something like that. And it's funny that you're like, you know, it's like talking to your friend, but like you're in this space and you'd think like quantum healing would be so serious. You know, we are doing quantum healings or some therapeutic thing that we're going to do with academically very nicely. It's like, no, no, no. It's like your body is taking you on a journey and it's cool because it puts you more of an ease, right? And the child of me needed love. And I just, you know, I embraced this child and there was a bond, connection made with this child.
Mm.
And the child went away. And then Matt guided me to other areas of my life to a point where I had seen a samurai, a warrior. And I thought immediately when I saw the samurai, I thought it was my father. So I kind of like went over and I was like trying to give this guy a hug as my dad. And I look up at him and it's me. And I was like, what? Like, so I'm meeting a version of myself and it was a beautiful experience. It was a very beautiful moment, very personal for me in that moment because it was so real. And it was something that has been a part of me, like this Japanese culture, just this knowing, this understanding
Yeah.
inside of me. But it gave validity to the things that I feel about Japanese culture and just another time.
Yeah.
And it became valid for me. So that was a lot of just beautiful synchronicities for me. And that stayed with me throughout my journey.
Like that, like how that warrior, it looks different in this lifetime, but that same energy comes into this lifetime, and it's like,
Oh, dude, that's really cool. Yeah, I love that you said that. Yeah, that's
Mhm.
really great. And you know, I just did a sound healing journey,
Yeah.
a crystal sound healing journey. This is the podcast just previously with Ada Andromeda.
Mhm.
And dude, same thing. She does the same thing as you, but she does it with song.
Yeah.
And I met a past life in that life. I'll send you the link to the podcast. I'm
Oh,
editing it right now, but beautiful, man. It was so
oh,
amazing. After I integrated with my samurai warrior past life, There was something that happened to me along my drug addiction with a woman in a house that was very, very strange. The entire experience was very strange. And I knew something always was altered inside of me from that moment. But I just navigated life, and I got out of my drug addiction, and I became who I was until I was brought back with Matt. I went back to that moment. He had said that there was a house, and in that house, he's guiding you. And there was a house, and I saw the house, and I knew the house right away. And then I saw the girl, and the girl was sad, and she was crying. And I said, I know this girl, to Matt. And I said, but she needs love. And this girl did something to me in that house. It altered me. She did something inside of me. And I knew it stayed with me. So I went over, and I knew I had to give her love, because I'm just love these days. That's what the healing is all about with Matt, is he guides you to just love through everything. So I go to this woman to give her some love, and she embraces me. She takes it in. And all of a sudden we separate, and there's a lit cord between the two of us. And the samurai, my version of myself, kind of like loops this sword to me. It was really, really cool. Like the katana. I grabbed the katana, and I just like instinctively cut the cord. From that day, I got goosebumps telling you this right now. From that day, I've been alleviated from something that was with me for quite some time. So it was so profound what I did with Matt, that it helped me elevate and take a layer off of me of something that subconsciously I knew happened, but I forgot about. And I knew she did something to me, but it was just energetically, right? Like she didn't physically hurt me or anything like that. But this is the ability humans have that we're able to do. And if we don't have methods like Matt has to teach us and to guide us, these things stay with us to the end. And that attachment to this energy, this woman with this energy, that could have broke me down over time without me ever understanding how to get there to find it. And the journey went on for, I believe we were in the session for 2.5 hours, and it was just so poetic in its truth, and the ability to take off layers and integrate with soul. It's like, you hear this stuff in spiritual communities, but let me tell you something about spiritual communities, man. Like, there's a lot of talk, you know what I'm saying? And it's not just talk. Like, there's some pedestal shit going on in those
You
communities,
don't get away from
right?
that.
Yeah, like people, and that's cool. Like, that's life. Ego's a thing. Like, if you don't check it, then sure, you're gonna fall victim to it, because you choose it. You choose to embellish it, and you choose to take the knowledge that's been given to you and kind of make other people work for it. And I don't believe in that kind of stuff. I feel like if you've been given information, we share it, and we do that from a very equal standpoint. And that was something that I was able to do with you in this community, because it was just, it was just real. Everything was authentic. And I love that. So it was really beautiful to be a part of that. So I would encourage anyone who's on this journey to navigate to Matt Schmidt. Where can people find you, bro?
Probably my website is www.mattschmidtqh.com. And then on YouTube, I'm at Matt Schmidt QH. So
cool. I will put all of his social medias in the description below. You can message me if you need any more awareness surrounding what Matt does, because it's nothing to be afraid of if you're looking to grow and you're looking to try something that is very accessible. Therapy is often overpriced and overbooked. It's difficult to get in. So people use that as an excuse as to why they can't go into their past to try and alleviate themselves from emotions that they've been holding.
Personally, for me too, I felt like I was in therapy for a long time, and I got to a point, I'm like, I know all the right answers. I don't feel any better. I was like, I know what you want me to say. I know what I'm supposed to say. Like, I don't feel that way. So like, by doing this, I felt like it was like 10 years of therapy in one day. Like, didn't even know that was an option. So
it's action. It's absolute action. And that's the thing that has propelled both of us in our lives. That's why we are in the position that we are in, but we don't have it all figured out. Like Matt said before, we are just students of life, and we've come to learn, and we're okay with that. And we're constantly learning. And sometimes we take 2 steps back to take 10 steps forward. It's just the way life moves. So action, action, action. So having a line of communication, and opening up avenues for people to heal is what I'm all about. And the people that I surround myself with are individuals who are aligned with the same philosophies. So people feel like their community isn't offering them these kind of avenues. It's like, just seek more, you know, and if this stuff hits for you, please share it. You know, if you watch Matt's YouTube, or if you get in touch with Matt and it works for you, please share that education. Just like he said, that's what we're doing here, is we're trying to raise the awareness and the love within the collective consciousness. Dude, really appreciate you and your time today, man. It's really beautiful.
Love you, Justin.
I love you too, bro. Like, straight up. Matt and I never met. Dude, I really, man, you're a soul brother to me. I love your family. Like, you're just such a great guy, and within your journey and with what you're doing and the way you communicate about it. Beautiful thing about this is we'll have you back on, and we'll just have more cool conversations. We'll bring more awareness to what we're doing. You know, like, we're just going to keep this conversation happening, so more and more people get comfortable with what we're talking about. And I want them to get to know you. I want them to get to know you more, because the more you get to know this guy, the more you're going to like him. And just because he is who he says he is. And I mean, shit, who doesn't want friends like that? You know, it's not surface level. It's like the man straight up. And I appreciate you for sharing what you've shared today, because Matt did tell me that this stuff hasn't come out really anywhere else. So, bro, like, much love. Really appreciate you. And I hope you were comfortable with everything today.
Yeah, it was perfect. It was time.
Okay, cool. All right. Much love to the family, bro.
All right. Thanks, Justin.